Welcome to the AH-94 attack helicopter. This session will serve as a general introduction to the vehicle. I'll give you a quick overview of the vehicle and cockpit so you can begin to familiarize yourself with where everything is. Don't worry about memorizing everything now. We'll go into more details on each part in later sessions. Let's begin by closing the canopy door. Grab this yellow handle. The AH-94 is a twin turboshaft attack helicopter with a tandem cockpit for 2 crew members. It has a traditional rotor configuration of a large main rotor and a small tail rotor. It can be flown from either the rear pilot seat or the front co-pilot gunner seat. You can decide how to split up responsibilities, but in general, the pilot in the back flies while the co-pilot in the front controls the weapons and sensors. It all depends on the situation and your preferences. Now let's quickly go over each of the components. Starting on the right, we have the main battery switch, the auxiliary power unit switch, starter switches for the 2 turbine engines, and panel. On the main instrument panel, we have 2 multifunction displays, or MFDs. The upfront display, or UFD, which can show fuel, turbine, and rotor status, as well as autopilot controls and various warnings. A radar warning receiver, an attitude indicator, vertical speed indicator, rotor RPM, torque, and engine RPM gauges, and master armament switches. At the top, we have power and brightness controls for the head-mounted display. And down below are the controls for the interior and exterior lights. On the left side of the panel, we have the rotor fold switch for storage, the rotor brake switch, the flight control indicator, which shows which pilot is currently in control of the aircraft, the parking brake switch, and the landing gear switch. Going down the left panel, we have the countermeasure stores count, the engine power lever, the stores jettison panel, and a music player. Finally, and most importantly, are the flight controls. On the left, we have the collective, which collects the pitch of the rotor blades so we can go up and down. And here we have the cyclic, which is used to control pitch and roll by adjusting the rotor blades independently as they cycle around. And the anti-torque pedals, which control the tail rotor for yaw control. Depending on your setup, you might be controlling these by twisting the cyclic. Go ahead and jump over to the front seat by pressing this button. Many of the components here are the same, with the exception of what we call the TDAC, which is the display and control view. The co-pilot can use this to control weapons and sensors without having to touch the flight controls. This concludes the general overview of the AH-94 cockpit. You can move on to the next session to learn about how to get this thing started. See you there. Welcome back. In this session, we'll go over the startup and shutdown procedures. Go ahead and pull the door shut. Jet turbines. Before starting up, let's make sure that everything's in the right state. The power lever should be pulled all the way back in the off position. The collective should be all the way down. The parking brake should be on. And the rotor should be unfolded with the switch in the off position. Okay, there we go. Let's start by turning on the main battery. This will supply power to all of the aircraft's electrical components. Now turn on the auxiliary power unit, or APU. The engine starters use up a lot of power, so we're going to need the APU to keep the battery charged. Power on the UFD and set it to the status display. This display mirrors what the analog gauges show, but you may prefer to see it here. With the APU spooled up, we can disengage and fire up the left engine starter. This system will spin up the turbine to a suitable RPM to begin combustion. Running two starters can often overload the power supply, so I'd start one at a time. Watch the engine RPM rise to about 10 or 12%, marked by the yellow region. Now we can click the power lever up to idle, and the starter will run the turbine up to about 30% and then automatically shut itself off. Keep an eye on the starter indicator light. Once it goes out, you can start the other engine. Okay, go ahead and start up the right engine. Great. Are fired up and running stable at idle. You can advance the power lever all the way forward to flight power. Watch the rotor RPM rise. Once it reaches the green region of the gauge, you'll notice that the engines will throttle down a bit to maintain the proper rotor RPM. This helicopter is equipped with a power governor, which means that you don't need to worry about applying the proper throttle to maintain rotor RPM. Just leave the power lever in the flight position and the system handles it for you. Since the engines are now generating power for the electrical system, now let's turn on each of the displays. At this point, the helicopter is ready to take off. We can practice taking off and hovering in another session, so let's go over the shutdown procedure. First, turn the displays back off. Make sure the collective is pushed down. Then just pull the power lever all the way back to off. This will cut the fuel supply to the engines and they'll start to wind down. After allowing the engines to spool down a bit, we can engage to turn off the main battery. And that's it. This concludes the AH-94 startup and shutdown procedures. See you next time. Welcome. Today we'll learn about the Target Acquisition Designation Site, or TADS, and how to use the gun alongside it. To make things easy, we can do this all here on the ground, so you don't have to worry about flying. Although these systems are accessible from either seat, start by turning on the battery and APU. Now turn on the HMD and MFDs. For this tutorial, let's turn on some hints so you can see what the controls do. Open the options page and enable control hints. This will show labels when you grab the collective, cyclic, or TDAC and can be turned on or off at any time. The primary targeting system is the TADS, and you'll most often be using it with the TDAC, which stands for TADS Electronic Display and Control. That's the central MFD with the controls attached to it here. Go ahead and open the TADS and power it on. Designate the TADS as the... This works just like the targeting pod in other vehicles, except that the SOI controls are on the left hand. Grab the TDAC controls using the grip buttons on your controllers. While the TDAC controls are held, use the left thumb control to slew the sensor and the right thumb control to zoom in and out. Now arm your weapons by pressing the arm switch. With the weapon system armed, you can switch weapons by using the thumb button on the right-hand TDAC control and fire by using... The weapon firing and switching functions are the same when holding the cyclic. Let's make sure the gun is in slave mode so the turret will point where we want it. Open the Equipment MFD page. Select the gun, and make sure the gimbal mode is slaved. When the gun is slaved, it will either track to where your head is pointing or where the TADS is pointing, if the TADS is the SOI. Use the TADS to find and designate the target on the range, and use the right trigger to fire. Nice shooting. Now disable SOI in the TADS and use your head to shoot the target on your left. Good. You can also set the TADS as SOI and enable head mode to have the TADS track your head and display its view in your HMD. When in this mode, pressing in on the left thumbstick on the TDAC will lock the TADS to where you've pointed it. As you can see, the TADS and the weapons can be controlled independently or in unison. If you have a co-pilot, you or your co-pilot your system by using the SOI button and the master arm button respectively. When you have weapons control, your arm button will indicate red, as it is now. If your co-pilot has weapons control, then your arm button will indicate yellow. Go ahead and use any method you choose to destroy the other targets downrange. Good work. Now let's go back to the rear seat. Since this seat doesn't have a TDAC, it has a second grip on the end of the collective that has the same functions as the left grip on the TDAC. Just as in the front, the right-hand controls of the TDAC are mirrored on the cyclic, except for the thumbstick, which can be used for trim. That's all for today. If you wish, you can go ahead and start up the engines and practice targeting and shooting while flying. Have fun! Get up and running and prepare for takeoff. Your first challenge will be to rise to 50 feet and then land right back where you started. Okay, it's high enough. Bring it back down to your pad. Get up and running and prepare for takeoff. Your first challenge will be to rise to 50 feet and then land right back where you started. Okay, it's high enough. Bring it back down to your pad. Get up and running and prepare for takeoff. Your first challenge will be to rise to 50 feet and then land right back where you started. Okay, it's high enough. Bring it back down to your pad.